price of games. Rise up, stand the price, the loss of legs. My occupation, in essence, not complacent. Block the banquet, stop the computation. I'ma make the coda, fools just wanna make the quota. They can't rock around here, they need baking soda. This a hydra, no way they taking over. Lay them below the basement with snakes and cobras.
It is very, very hard to be an artist and to build your name up. And like, I'm all for helping artists kind of follow a path, but at the same time, you got to walk that path. And that path has potholes and cross bridges and other things that this analogy doesn't really hold up to. But you're not helping anybody by telling them it's going to be easy, Even one thing I do now, if I'm talking about comics, is I'll bring up the fact that it's you're going to have to prepare to lose friends because it's an isolating job, and it's not even just talent you need to have like a mental, like there's some people who are incredible artists who do not have the mental capacity to do the job. They just don't.
Yeah. Right.
There's some people who are like, they're okay at drawing, they're decent, but they do have the mental capacity, and they manage fine because they're able to sit down and draw every day and deal with like month 3 of not having seen somebody or something like that, Especially when I see so many younger people having anxiety and problems like that, it's like, that's going to be tough for you, man, because like, you need a certain amount of resilience to be able to handle just the actual day-to-day of it.
And that's the issue I think we talked about with that comics broke me hashtag. It was just like, this is what it is. Like, you can complain all you want. This is the job.
Give me an opportunity to like defend some of that stuff.
Hey guys, my new sketchbook, Dumb Shark, is finally out.
That's great, Fratello. Congrats. Eric, what do you think?
Wow, Mateo. This book has really changed how I think about art. The style, the details, the inking techniques, not to mention the colors. Everything on this book is off the chart. You are so far ahead of any other artist, especially me. I know I always say I don't like your Mr. Freeze book, but that's actually a lie. I was just jealous of your incredible talent because I love everything you do, and sadly, I know deep in my heart that I'll never be at your extraordinary level. You truly are the best artist on planet Earth. This book is a game changer, man. I think everyone out there should go and order Mateo's new art book, Dumb Shark, before it sells out.
Gee willikers, Eric. That was an incredible endorsement. You really made me want to buy it. How can I get my hands on it?
You can find it on www.essentialsequential.com, or if you're in Europe, you can order it on www.pulps.fr.
Wow, Eric. I didn't know you were such a big fan of mine. Thank you. I really don't need to add anything else. You said it all.
What an asshole.
Wait, what?
This is the Inkpulp Podcast.
Hey, yo.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the Inkpulp Podcast. We are joined today by my good friend Eric Canetti and my Italian brother, the Grinch. And Declan Shalvey's here with us today as well.
Doc, welcome.
Thank you.
You've been listening to this podcast for a bit, you said, because, offline you were saying there's a couple things that we talk about. You appreciate our sort of like our honest back and forth. So I suspect that you have a couple notches as far as episodes onto your belt. Let me ask you this. And by the way, thank you. We've been talking about having you on for a little bit. Your patience and grace with us is great, but also for me, I gotta be honest with you, I wanted to give you as much reference as possible to be like, are you sure you want to be on this stupid ass podcast with like, you know what I mean? Because I think we're going to end up talking about it eventually.
It's a great pleasure to be on the Old Man Yells at Cloud podcast. Thank you for having me on. I feel like this is my home.
Jokes aside, Deck, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thanks very much for having me, guys. Like, I mean, I love the podcast. I love. I was saying off air that so many times you guys are touching on stuff where I want to jump in the conversation, but that is not the nature of a one-sided broadcast. So it's nice to be with you. Also, this might be slightly less traumatizing than when I was on the previous Inkpulp podcast, where
you know what's funny, Deck, is when you eat. When you email me, the picture I have of you in my contacts is from when we recorded that podcast.
Oh, really?
And that was in Chicago in my hotel room years and years ago.
I couldn't remember what city it was, but yeah, I was. No, it was great. I mean, I had a great chat with you, but I remember I had mentioned at one stage that I didn't plan on it, that my dad had abandoned my family as a young kid. When I was a kid, and and then I talked about like how hard I work at whatever I do, and Shawn, he just went like, "Do you think that's why? Because your dad left?" And I was like, "No, I do." I was like,
it was basically more like a therapy session than a podcast.
I think that's the great sort of evolution of this podcast. It was just Shawn back in the day for like 3 or 4 years trying to make everybody feel as shitty as he does. You know what I mean? It was
I was trying to make myself feel better by pointing out how shitty everyone's life was.
I can tell that, like, as the year went on, Shawn always tried to make it. By the way, Shawn, thank you for always trying to do this. But at the beginning of the year, the first one was always going to be with me, right? But I could tell where we were in the calendar year, the more downtrodden the interviews became. You know what I mean? That's like they were just sitting around taking shots, you know, considering whether or not they wanted to cut their wrists vertically instead of horizontally. You know, like it was just a lot of that. And then at one point we were like, Shawn, knock it off. Go work on yourself before you start dismantling your guests and stop introducing alcohol into everything. Anyway, Dec, even after that traumatic,
I get it. You like hip hop. We all understand, Shawn. You like hip hop. It's fine.
Do you though? Do you get it? Does everyone really understand?
Yeah, I'm down with the kids. Thanks a million. No, well, all you guys. I mean, Shawn. We keep trying to meet each other at shows, and it doesn't happen. And
yeah,
I don't think. I mean, I've met you, Matteo, a few times, but I don't think we've ever had a proper chat. And same with Eric. We've always said hi, but never like have a proper chat. And those the proper chats are what I love the most about shows. You know, it's where you're digging into somebody and getting to know them.
Honestly, that right there, that's exactly why I started this show, because I would go to conventions and have these great conversations with people. It's like, I want to record some of this.
Well, I find a lot of shows now these days are like, "Hey, how have you been? How's things? Are you well?" You know, it's you know, how are your kids? How's you're asking human questions now because you know people, rather than like, you know, I remember when I was younger, it was all about like, I don't know you as a human. I just know you as the guy who did this amazing cover, and how did you do that? So I found myself not really asking those questions anymore, which I think, you know, like that's why it's not a plug, but I'm doing my own podcast. Crappy little podcast, because I like talking process and stuff, but I just found that I wasn't really doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you're using Jamie, who edits this podcast, so you're in the family. So, do you have a release date?
That's how I like to think of it, using him. It's out now. I'm just going to do them about once a month. I have the fourth one is next week, but I just call it Tape Deck Talks, where I'm just specifically talking to somebody who I've previously worked with and kind of looking at the issues that we did, or issues, and talked about working together. Because I found, you know, like one of them was with Jeff Parker, who that's my first breaking in. It was at Marvel with Jeff, and I realized we never really talked about the book. We worked together for like 2 years nearly, like, and we didn't like, you know, really get in, because, you know, you're working, you get the script and you're working on it, and you have a bit of a laugh on email, but you don't really talk about it. So it was great to talk about like why he wrote certain scripts for me and others for somebody else, and, you know, what I liked about it. And it's kind of nice to just revisit older work and kind of dig into it that way, you know. Cool.
Was that Thunderbolts?
Yeah, that was Thunderbolts. Because I'm Irish.
I was trying to get you to say it.
You fucking worked with.
Because the first time I met you, you were like, I'm working on Thunderbolts. And it took me a second to be like, what's he working on? Thunderbolts.
Yeah, Paolo from Cadence Comic Art thought I had a speech impediment. But what doesn't help, is I just did an Alien book, and it's called Thaw. And now I'm doing Thundercats. I'm not really helping my own cause here by working on books I can't pronounce.
Are these books you're primarily writing? Is that mainly what you're doing?
Wait, Shawn, before he gets onto that question, have you recognized that, Mateo is English challenged enough as it is, right? And he has not said anything in the entire time that Declan has been talking. Because I don't think Mateo is understanding anything that Deck is saying. And he's just laughing.
I'm getting
along.
it. Like, okay. I'm having troubles here and there. But, as time goes, it'll get easier for me during this 1 hour, so it'll get easier. Also, today, my Wi-Fi is not working particularly well today. So I see you guys all pixelated. So I just have to focus on the audio, especially. So that's
sorry.
I'm working with it. I have to work with a lot of obstacles today.
Well, I can let you know, Mateo. What you can't hear is me being very charming. Other people they consider this charming, but really, I just can't talk properly.
All right, Shawn. Go ahead, pal. What were you about to ask?
Oh, I was just going to say, a few things, but I was asking if writing is primarily what you're doing on a freelance level these days.
No, not really. Kind of, I guess. Well, I've been working on my own book where I'm really more concentrating my drawing on that. I'm writing and drawing it. Right. So weirdly, the freelance stuff it's probably covers and writing, a lot of covers, and I was writing Alien for the last year, and now I'm started writing Thundercats for the next year. So it's nice. It was cool last year because I was writing an image book and I was writing and drawing an image book, and I was writing a Marvel book on the side, whereas most of my career has been like doing Marvel stuff and like a little bit of creator owned on the side. So last year was a weird flip to be primarily doing creator owned and then getting paid to write, which doesn't really feel like work, I mean, it's work, don't get me wrong, but you all guys all know, like, drawing is hours in the chair at the board. It's physically demanding. So to be doing something that isn't as physically demanding, it's mentally, draining, but it doesn't feel like I've worked unless, I'm literally at the board. So because that's kind of weird to get my head around, but as a result, I often don't give it the time I need. I realize like the deadlines are hard because I think, writing, I'll do that in a day. And then you realize, no, this takes 5 days, But yeah, I'd say it's kind of a mix now, really. Writing some stuff, drawing. I'm still drawing pages, but it's generally on my own book, but now I'm doing a bit more work for hire stuff again.
Was that shift towards doing mainly creator-owned stuff over freelance? Was that intentional?
Yeah, I mean, like I did well at Marvel when I was starting out. I was always like looking at everybody else and going, God damn it, I wish I was doing that. Mateo and Secret Avengers, oh God, I'd love to do that. And I'd just be jealous of everybody. But I think when I did Moon Knight with Warren and then we made the shift to creator owned with Injection, and you know, I used to go out with Jordi Belair and she did a lot of creator owned stuff, and seeing the kind of like creative freedom, real ownership, you know, what you could get out of that was kind of, I was kind of doing Marvel stuff and looking over at all the cool creator owned stuff that was happening. I was like, that seems like a cooler place to be. And since I jumped in there, I've really kind of done both. You know, I'm quite lucky. I know there's some guys who, they get pigeonholed as indie guys, or they get pigeonholed as, you know, superhero guys. But I have been lucky to be able to kind of straddle two fields. So ever since then, you know, I feel like if I'm doing work for hire stuff and that's frustrating, it doesn't matter because I can put that energy into creator owned. And if the creator owned stuff is too demanding and requires so much work to promote and push, then at least the work for hire stuff, you can just, you know, just do the work. So it means I'm not really frustrated. Like I think some people can get frustrated if they're just in one area of it, you know, because creator owned is very demanding, and the work for hire isn't demanding in the same way, and there's real money, but you know, there's also restrictions. So I feel like I don't get bothered by restrictions because I have a whole place where I'm not restricted, and vice versa.
That's great. That's great.
That's great. That's great.
Well, I remember having a conversation with Sean Murphy years ago, and he was getting all these offers to do different books, and he had said, I'm paraphrasing now, but something along the lines of like, I'm being offered all these books by C-list writers. I'm a C-list writer, so I can just use my art to build myself up. And years have proved he was right, and I think I've had the same strategy where I did really well at Marvel, where I get offered, big writers, which was it's amazing. I'm so grateful for it, but weirdly, then you get to a point where the people who you're being offered to work with are not at the same level as you. And as an artist, you're like, it's like, I don't know if you feel this way, but my strategy has always been work with writers who are bigger than you because they bring you up with them. Not that it's not to have a go at writers is tough to break in as a writer, but all the status and attention you've taken years to build, because it also takes it's writers have it hard in some ways, but you can make a name big fast. Look at someone like Donnie who came in, whereas an artist, it's so incremental. And if you lose that, how do you get it back? So working with writers who are breaking in, it benefits them, not you. And I don't mean to sound like a dickhead, but like,
that's true. Hold on.
No.
I have an opinion about that, right? Like, in as far as that particular ecosystem is concerned, right? I think there's a time and place for it. For instance, it's like in part, it's similar to like wrestling, right? When you're the person, whether it be the writer or whether you're the artist, I think if you are from the business component, from the editorial component, they understand you as a value to the team and to the company and to the brand, right? And if they want to bring somebody up, right, basically take a bump for this new person, I think there's an appropriate time to do it, right? But they have to be aware, you as a creator, as an artist, have to be aware, I'm the person that's doing basically the heavy lifting in this particular project. And as long as there's that transparency, that's totally cool. But at some point you go like, I think this should not be a trend in which I'm bumping up a lot of your C-list people or ready to break in people because I worked so hard to get into this spot. I don't mind doing it once in a great while because obviously that's sort of a stewardship that I feel like it's incumbent upon me. And I think there's a time and place for it. But at some point, once it starts to become a trend, that you're the person, it goes into the space that you're talking about, Deck, which is like, yeah, I'm now the person that's bringing people up. And by accident, it's not anything malicious. It starts to diminish the work that I put in over the years. And you're right. It's a little bit more difficult to make that sort of headway.
Maybe diminish is fair, but it is, the day before I started working with Warren Ellis and the day after, nothing really changed. But because he is a genius, as I've joked, like I got that genius stink on me. And I had no intention of washing it off. I'm like, yes. Yeah. And people started treating me differently straight away. Now, I do think I got better, but that regardless, I think there's plenty of artists who work with Warren who I personally not into their stuff at all, but they're considered geniuses because they did that. But that does wash off over time, and depending on the gigs that you take, and it's a hard thing to quantify. It's not status, isn't the word I'm looking for, but like to be considered a hot artist, which I don't think I ever really got to that point, but I got to I don't know, I'd say like if the A levels are the highest and it's a big level, I probably got to maybe B plus or maybe A minus, the very lowest rungs of the biggest guys. And I'm never going to be like Shawn or John Romita or, the top guys, but I was lucky enough, I think, to get into a certain bracket.
You left out Mateo.
I actually would include Mateo. I'm trying to hold back my Mateo fandom, but I know I 100% I would like. I don't force the compliment out of me. It'll come out naturally. But who there's guys who get into that bracket and they kind of lean back out of it, and your value actually is probably the word I'm looking for. Your value as an artist is subjective. I mean, if the best guys we knew, how many artists do we know who are incredible? but nowhere near the top because they're not considered, either because they're nutcases or they're hard to work with or for whatever reason, that affects their value. Just being on time is a value. There's all these different levels, and it's a weird alchemy to get you to the very top. But I think there's also, you don't know what's going to bring you back down again. And I think what I tried to do was use my art to bolster my writing. And when I would use that to work with, like, you know, artists who weren't known, like, my Irish crime graphic novels, the two I've done were both with like artists in Ireland who nobody knew at the time, because I loved their work and I wanted to, whatever small value I could bring people to a book, I wanted them to find like this new artist. So I feel like I'm doing my best to keep my value as an artist here and bring it up with the writing, and hopefully now I think I maybe level. I don't know. I'm just talking about myself.
I mean, that's in the spirit of. Yeah, I think that's in the spirit of what I was talking about, Dick, which is like you saw a value proposition there in which you understood, hey, this could level up my writing, but also bring up an artist that I really like, that I'm really super keen into. And that's why I didn't make it about like you I didn't exclusively point it out as from the creative standpoint. I pointed it out from more the managerial and supervisorial standpoint, to be like understanding what that balance looked like, especially in regards to their brand. If they know that you as an artist can bring up a potential, like somebody who's right at the cusp of becoming a relevant writer, or at least like in one of those ones that are like, you know, month in, month out, really moving the needle as far as the titles that they're working on, that's a good sort of lever to pull on, right? But eventually, if it becomes a trend of like, wait a second, that's all that Declan is doing is helping these guys up, I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that's right.
No, true. Which is why you need to kind of be filling the machine for yourself too. Yeah. Like, I remember when I was offered to write and draw Deadpool versus Old Man Logan, and I talked to the editor that like I couldn't draw it. And they were like, okay, sure, no worries. But then I kind of wrote back, I was like, well, I could still write it. That was part of the offer. And they were like, well, we were hoping you could write and draw, because I think clearly they want the value of the art to bring. I'm like, well, you know, my name will be on the front. I'll do covers. You know, if we have an artist who's like not the same as me, but similar, like, I think that does all the work that you wanted to do. And I do think that actually worked out. And I would say another thing is weirdly, Time Before Time is a book at Image I was writing, and the sales for that have been about the same as Old Dog, the book that I'm writing and drawing completely. Sure. I thought Old Dog would do better. Now, admittedly, the market's a little bit different, so maybe that's not a fair comparison, but still, you know, I was thinking it would do a lot better because I was writing and drawing, doing everything on it. It's all about the same. So you wonder at some stage, is it about the name you've built for yourself? I'm of the mind of like, as an artist, your value is really the last thing you drew. You know, I've seen some guys kind of go off and hit the commission circuit and do kind of like head sketches, and I feel like their kind of value is diminished because everybody can get a kind of an okay sketch. But like, if you are doing like, say, for example, Matteo, amazing fucking Batman covers and stuff, and incredible commission, like I don't think your value could be any higher than it is right now, because the work you're doing is. Every
time you give me a compliment, I look down.
We don't
Eric,
need to tell him this.
And he's.
You see, just came out.
No. I'm looking at Eric, like the disappointment on his face every time you drop a comment, man. He's fucking like the king of darkness.
You see.
Yeah. What you know, Eric? What we say in Italy? We say envy is a bad thing.
Oh shit! Shots fired.
Ouch. You see, I think you and I are envy brothers, Matteo. Or sorry, ego brothers, I should say. But that was the one thing actually I learned about this podcast. I didn't realize that Eric was kind of like had an Oscar the Grouch type element, because anytime I've met him, he's been the sweetest, kindest. Like when Eric has talked to me in person, I feel like his soul is like
Declan. It was just the cover.
And then I see on the podcast, and he's just like, you know,
he's really
like if Shawn is Eeyore. Yeah, if Shawn was Eeyore, then Eric was Oscar the Grouch. I'm not sure what Matteo is necessarily, but that was. I'm like, I feel like I didn't know Eric at all, because he was just so lovely, and like on the podcast, he's just like cutting you down.
Listen, I think in contrast, like, so what real life is probably how truly I am. But when I am around these two dum-dums, it's so difficult. They just, and also by contrast, like if you're dealing primarily in like neutral grays and you put it up against something that's like bright yellow or bright red, you're like, hey, that neutral gray is warmer, right? I think that's what happens. These guys are just out of control. Balls of fucking sugar that just have absolutely no direction to them whatsoever. Well, so by contrast, I'm like,
talk by themselves. Just look at us. Look at Shawn and me. We have green and blue and light red and a bunch of colors behind
bright
us.
Orange.
And look at you. Yeah, you just have a black and some sort of yellowish red something, That's
I look on grey, so
okay. So there you go. See that?
But Deck, you're in Ireland, so you can't really help it.
See that particular comment, Deck? Right? That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's so like it's all I can do. We're 22 minutes in, and it's all I could do to not like. Well, you know what? I could just be drinking coffee elsewhere instead of talking to.
I know you need. I think with the
and
dynamic.
to be fair, Deck. To be fair, you have met the real Eric. He is a sweetheart because when we used to do shows together, it's after the show, Eric had enough of Mateo and I. And so Mateo and I would always go out to dinner and Eric, do you want to go? No, I'm just going to get room service. Yeah. And so we do. We bring out.
I got to be honest with you. I want to fucking call room service right now. You know what I mean? I've been trying to fucking offload this podcasting responsibility to as many people who come on here, but they don't ever want to take it on. So I guess I'm stuck with these idiots.
Eric, you can still back out of Awesome Con. You can still do it. You don't
I can.
You
know what? See, here's the thing. As far as Awesome Con is coming up sometime in early March.
Early March.
Early March.
7th to
I have the worst case of like convention Alzheimer's because here's what the thing, like Shawn's right. At the beginning of the show, I am so happy to see these dum-dums, like in real life. Oh my gosh, Shawn, like got this great energy. Mateo is always very Mateo is very warming, inviting.
He has this huge penis.
Individually. Yeah, because that's what you greet me with. You see me for the first time and immediately the pants come off. Anyway, so here's what happens, right? You meet them individually because rarely do they come in at the same time, So let's say we meet at the airport. And it's only ever happened once that we all met at the airport all at the same time, and my general interest just plummets. But most of the time, 90% of the time, we meet each other at different stages of the show. So it's me, Shawn, meeting for the first, ahead of time, or me or Mateo. Yeah. And so I only get I get their personalities independent of each other. Right. So Shawn's like catching up with family. We talk about food. We talk about Mateo, same thing. We talk about work and we talk about like his next projects because he can't help himself. Right. So so we just end up talking. And then somewhere in the hotel or like a dinner or something like that, they get together and it is the worst version of sugar Voltron you have ever fucking melled.
Wait, Eric, did you call us Sugar Voltron?
Yeah. And it's just like the combination of the shittiest fucking lions that you have ever seen. And it's all I can do to be like, it's not even convention day yet. And I want to fucking leave. So convention people, if there's a reason why I genuinely look uninterested in the show, it's not because of your organizational skills. It's because I had to sit next to these two guys.
Well, look, you need that dynamic. If it was three of the exact same personalities, it would be too much. You couldn't listen to it. You need, need the sobering influence. Otherwise, it would just be chaos.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same reason why I love having guests on like yourself, because it kind of just stops them from talking. We are at 25 minutes in now,
especially when it's me,
and maybe Shawn has done the majority of the talking, and Mateo can barely understand you. So it's like, okay, it's kept them.
Well, you know what it is also? I was thinking about it as we were talking. Like right now I'm writing issue number 2 in my book. And I've been writing for the last 10 days in Italian. So I've been thinking in Italian a lot, while normally I think in English a lot during the day. So my brain is slowly getting used to English again, as we go on with the podcast. So it's gonna get amazing by probably minute 50 or something of the show. I'm gonna be exploding, but
so far it's a made up technical issue. Now it's a made up writing issue. Just admit you're just in awe. You're spellbound by my presence, and you're just trying to figure out like how you can talk to me on a human level. No.
Declan, I think you're the first guest that has intimidated Mateo. You have actually intimidated Mateo.
Fucking podcast. Hey, can I follow up on something what you just said? And I think it relates to what Mateo's talking about, Deck. You have how many books do you have under your belt as far as like you writing?
Jesus, fucking hell. 2 graphic novels. Let me think. Nick Fury, Marvel, Deadpool versus Old Man Logan, now Alien. That's 5 books, and now Old Dog.
5 series, right?
Yeah. Well, depending on graphic novels or miniseries.
Yep.
7 now, I think. Jesus.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there at some point where you put on the sweater of like becoming a writer, right? The metaphorical one. Was there ever a turning point for you where you said, "Oh, I'm struggling less with the writing, this writing exercise"? Was there something that made you go, right, that actually comes very, organically, not necessarily natural, but it's a lot more organic than when I first started?
Well, when I started, I don't know if it's like for you guys on your books, but I was like, well, a writer is a person who has it all figured out, and they go off into their cabin and they type and it all comes out. And once I realized it's more like sculpture, where it's like a blob and you'll tidy it up a bit and then you'll take a bit out. Or I saw it as a kind of a graphic or like a design project, like you have a brief and you have a job and you can do the job within a limit, and then you can bring things around. Like once I have a bit more of a I mean, I am as pretentious a wanker as you can imagine, but I do have a very kind of very straightforward way of looking at how to make something, practical. I mean, I think it's one of my strengths is like I know how to do a thing and I can get it done a certain way and I know the process. So I think it was just figuring out the process of doing it and then going back and similarly, I don't know if you have this, sometimes clearly Mateo doesn't have this problem, but when you draw a page and then you come back to it later and you're like, ugh, looks terrible. When you have that removed eye, when you look at your work in a new way, I mean, Mateo is perfect, so that isn't an issue for him. But
no, of course.
I noticed that
it never happened. So I don't know what he's talking about, but I mean,
I know that you can't. I know you can't relate, but we
lost Eric.
That was too much.
He's out. Eric's out.
Now we can go nuts.
He did it.
But in a similar way where, I mean, I'm sure you've all had that experience where once you're removed from it and you can look at a drawing in a new way, you're like, oh, that arm is totally wrong and you'll fix it. I noticed I just kind of needed that with writing, where I was so worried that it was going to be terrible if I just did it. And then I think I've heard it referred to like a vomit draft, basically. And then you can go back to it later and realize, oh, well, actually, that should just be over here. And because it's much easier to tidy up something, if you do roughs and then you finesse the drawing. If you basically have a script, but like no one's read it yet, so it's only finished when you say it is. You realize you're saying a certain word too many times, or that actually would look better over here. And I noticed if I have a drawing approach to writing where I just kind of tweak it until it actually feels better. If I could acknowledge what's bad about it. And there's no, you don't take it personally. When you do a drawing, and again, it's hard to fix it in that moment because you're too connected to it. What I need to do is just instill a level of distance so I can be a bit more ruthless and not, because I will say, like, I'm more, if I read reviews, I try not to, but if I do read a review of something I've written, I probably take it more personally than drawing, because with drawing, I feel like I know what I want and what I'm going for. And if you don't like it, well, it's your fucking problem, really. Writing is different because people get more invested and they're because everyone thinks they can criticize writing and they don't really know how to criticize art. They're probably overly criticized writing. Like I listened to a YouTube review of an issue of Aliens recently, and I just kind of laughed because like what the things he didn't like, I'm like, well, he might be right, but that's what I wanted to do. So you know, I think this is something is building confidence. Building confidence was the tough thing. Yeah, sure, man.
I wanted to ask you. So, what's the process for you when writing? Like, do you build basically a generic plot first, and then you go to dialogues, and then you go back to the actual scenes, to the panels, to each individual panel, or you start from dialogues? Like because for example, a thing that I do now is I'm imagining the story that I have in mind as if it was a movie. So I start writing all the dialogues, and then from that I divide it in pages and panels and stuff like that. So I was curious to see, because from what you said so far, I can see myself in that kind of process that you're describing. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, no, I probably don't. I do dialogue last, really, unless there's like a cool line I thought of, and you're like, yeah, and then you write it into the script. You're like, oh God, it's awful. What was I thinking? Yeah, I mean, I have a very some people are like, oh, do you like draw it out first and then write it? But like I'm just like write up a straight up script. I'll write a paragraph of what happens in the issue, and then I'll flesh out that paragraph into basically what the scenes are, and then I'll mark them down numbers, like page 1. I mean, I think, and you probably the same as this, I have a fairly good sense of what'll fit on a page. You know, one line can be a splash page, or it could be 6 panels, just depending on the line you write. You'll instinctively know roughly how much room. It's like I'm writing Thundercats at the moment, and I'm, you know, I've taken it all and I've broken it like down into how many pages, and I realize, okay, I have a bit more room here. Do I want to expand a scene, or do I want to add a scene? Or you know what, actually this would flow more naturally if I moved this 2-page scene up and moved it down. So I'm really just writing. It's basically it is just a Word doc of just nonsense, because I'm just copying and pasting and moving it around. And then I'll start writing, and the dialogue will come as I do it.
Okay, gotcha.
Because I don't really feel like I have, you know, I feel like I'm in the scene and the characters start talking to each other as I'm writing it. And like I said, then I'll put it away for a few days and come back and I'll punch it up. Now and then I probably have a strong visual idea for something. Like I know what the splash page is going to be. And then that's pretty easy, because you just write splash page, and that page is done. But even like I like splash pages and double page spreads for structural reasons too, because, you know, if I know it's going to be the beginning, then I know you need to earn that later by having a denser scene, little things like that. Like I said, like a designer is kind of how I see it. But the dialogue and stuff would generally come last, just personally, unless I think you have a note for the next thing I'm working on. I was talking to the editor, and I have like 2 lines that I should really write these down, put these down in a bloody Word doc, because I'm probably just going to throw this out next week. But yeah, now and then there might be a line, but like I feel like I really need to work on those lines. It was one thing I hated or loved about working with Warren Ellis, was now and then there'll just be this savage line in a panel, and you know, you're like, when you know you're going to draw it, you're like going to go, oh, that's going to be a really cool panel. But I don't feel like I have them going in. I need to kind of go back and work on them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
That's
Have
awesome.
you always been writing, or you just started as an artist? And if you started later writing, when did you start, like during your career?
Yeah, later. I mean, I just wanted to draw, man. Like I just wanted to draw for Marvel, was my childhood dream. And then I got there, and it was amazing. And I wanted bigger projects, and I got those. And I just realized, this is a fairly cynical point to make, but like if you can write your own stuff, then you're never really stuck for a job. Like I said, I was lucky to be getting kind of interest.
How is that cynical?
Yeah. Why is that cynical, Deck? That sounds.
It's a cynical thing to do something creative just for career reasons, as it were. You know, like it's like I don't know. I guess I felt it just might be a kind of a very surface level reason to do something, but I did realize I was in a good place with getting good opportunities with big writers, but I also felt like, well, what if people don't like me someday and nobody wants to work with me? Then if I could write my own stuff, then at least no matter what, I could always just tell stories. And I've noticed I've been doing that more with like coloring my own work and like designing my stuff, and it's all having more control of the storytelling. And I've liked writing. Writing is like the kind of the major way to do it, but same with coloring and the design work too. Like I feel having more ownership over the work I'm doing has been a lot more satisfying. Even on the work for hire stuff has been cool. Like with Alien, I'm writing the new series. I'm writing it, but I'm drawing the backups, flashback story, and I'm coloring them. You know, great. That's cool. It feels cool to have so much of yourself in your stories, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what I'm hearing, and the reason why I didn't find it all that cynical is because like you're obviously like inhabiting this thing where you're like, why am I to be just like partitioned in this one sort of like very niche, very specific sort of job set instead of being able to say like I can pretty much do everything, you know? And I think there's a version of an industry that points at you and goes like, yeah, you're just going to be an artist, right? You're just going to be the illustrator of the book. And I don't think that's like for some people it's a perfect fit. Right. But at some point you realize, wait, I only took on that role because that's the one that was available to me. That does not, however, define everything that I can do. I'm never going to hear the end of this. Right. So please, when he starts calling or like starts patting himself in the back and you can hear it all the way to Italy and Ireland, it's my fault. But we have a good friend that Shawn has an antagonistic relationship with. His name is Dan Penosian. Shawn cannot stand Dan. Dan just Shawn and Dan. Yeah, are like oil and water. But here's the thing. Dan suddenly took on this sort of role of being able to do a lot of things on his own. And I think he'd always been capable of doing it. But for a while, he was struggling to break through that sort of like preconceived notion of what an illustrator ceiling looks like until Dan just said, screw it, I'm going to do everything on my own. So not only is he, I think the stuff that he's doing now is so fucking good that it gets by people how good it is because it looks super effortless for him, you know? But the thing that I don't think people give him enough credit for, and when I read Slots for the first time, by the way, which is his best work and it's never going to get any better than that. So good luck, Dan, making a career as a writer.
It's basically he's king of spice.
Yeah. It's his king of spice. He's never going to do anything better than that. Did you recognize how Matteo always managed to bring it back to himself as far as like, Jesus Christ, Matty, calm the fuck down.
Not only do I recognize that I employ it myself as much as I can. I would say actually King of Spies was
it makes sense because you're the guest, you know, talk about yourself as much as possible. Matty is like here every fucking day and it's really annoying. You know,
I was also really another compliment to Matteo is when I was doing my book Old Dog, which is a kind of a spy type thing, and then I saw King of Spies come out. I'm like, son of a bitch, just let me have one thing, will you? You know, the work on it was amazing. But I realized, sorry, I didn't actually fully answer Matteo's question with regards to when did I start doing it. I think when I was working on Injection, Warren was doing like all these cool books at DC and Marvel and Injection, and Jordy was doing like Injection and all these cool books at Marvel and DC and create their own stuff. And I was just doing the one book, which I loved, don't get me wrong. But I realized, you know, I have more stories in me, and it's tough as an artist to do anything of note. You've got to put like 3 years into a book where people can stay with you and stuff, and people's attention spans are short and they will forget about you after the first volume. So all those things are in my mind. But I had the idea for Savage Town, which was basically a kind of an Irish set Sopranos, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I realized no one's going to make anything like this. Not mainly because there's no fucking market for it, but I had the story in me, and I knew I couldn't draw it because it just didn't make sense. I couldn't take a year off and draw a book. that maybe a lot of people who be into superhero stuff aren't going to read. But I could pay somebody who's a good artist who who isn't at my level rate wise, and they could do the book, and I could still get that story made. I could spend the time write it, but I couldn't spend the time to draw it. And use that as an experiment to see how would that do. And it did okay. I mean, it didn't do crazy or anything, but it's been optioned as an animated series now. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. But that had never happened had I not I'm just gonna try it. And around the same time, an editor at Marvel, Will Moss, asked me to write and draw a Nick Fury serial. And I have to credit for him for that, because it's not like I've been trying to write stuff, but he really liked Injection, and he said like, I think like you've like your stuff has a strong sense of storytelling. I think you'd be good at writing, which was like, not a lot of editors really think that far ahead, they're too busy. So I was doing both at the same time, and then when I was asked to write and draw the Deadpool thing, basically it was a no, but then I showed them, because they didn't know how I would write for somebody else, but the Savage Town book had been lettered, so I was able to send that to them. So weirdly, it was cool. That year, just kind of things kind of came together in a weird way, but it wasn't like a hard campaign for me to be like, I'm going to be a writer now. I basically just had a story I really wanted to make, and as I was doing it, I really liked the process and wanted to do it more.
Awesome. Oh, and by the way,
that could be your career path too,
since you're talking about Injection, recently, Shawn and I were at the show in Abu Dhabi. So they asked me to do a really short, workshop about covers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I used a bunch of your Injections covers to talk,
cool.
I was describing different types of covers, and yours were perfect for
bad covers.
Designy and both atmospheric covers. They were amazing, man. Beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, Deck.
Thanks, man. I thought it was going to be an excuse of how what not to do.
Oh no! I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I sat in on Mateo's talk, and when those came up, I was like, "Wow, Deck really killed these. These are incredible."
Thanks. Well, I spent years trying to get on covers when I was at Marvel. I couldn't get on covers for the life of me. And it's mad now. I counted them up recently. I'm on like 250 for Marvel alone, which is mad, But
Mateo's got competition.
Well, they go for the best, and they can't get Mateo. They go for the rest, which is me. But no, I like my covers. I like my covers a mix of illustration and design. I mean, it is why. Well, also why I like all of you guys' work, because I feel you have the same kind of sensibilities of like really great illustration mixed with knowing where to have negative space, or knowing where not to draw and knowing where to draw. I was actually talking to this young artist who's incredible, but he's just way too obsessed with detail everywhere, and it's just. Like I was trying to say to him, was like, you're so good. You just need to be good here and just like relax. Otherwise, everyone's going to notice all the great stuff, but you fill it with all this stuff. You just can't see it anymore. But this is the type of stuff I like. I like design, and I like illustration. And I like covers that kind of hit both notes,
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of negative space, to balance out the other stuff, that's what we do in this podcast. So Shawn and I are the positive space, and then we have the big negative space, down there to compensate. And that's why this podcast works,
Can I ask you guys? Speaking of, what I like about the show is you guys talk about a lot of stuff that online would be kind of, I don't mean blowing up or anything, but stuff that can be a little bit touchy. And I like it because it's a conversation. It's a very even conversation, whereas online that would just be retweeted or people would just try shame you or whatnot. Have you found this a good place to be able to just kind of talk stuff out? Because I mean, as somebody who listens, it's nice and sobering, and but the way the kind of culture is now, it's very easy. People tend to just take that and go like, fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. You're old men.
Well,
what do you know about the industry?
Yeah.
Oh, you said old men. So yeah, you're talking about Shawn and Eric. So please, Shawn and Eric. reply.
Oh, okay. Then I'll answer. Fuck it.
I know. Mateo.
You can be 30 and an old man now, you know.
Right. If those platforms like Twitter and Instagram, if that's kind of wired into the system because it's just about short little takes, and whereas a podcast is more of a discussion, a long format, I think it's harder to hear it and be so reactive because we do present many angles and we do present the complexity of whatever we're talking about. It's not just a simple boom, I'm on this side and anyone not on this side is a bad guy. So I don't know if it's the fact that it's podcasting being long format helps it or I don't know. I mean, part of me also thinks we're just authentically ourselves.
And also, nobody's watching the podcast, so that's probably why.
Well, that's true. That's the main thing. We can say whatever the fuck we want because nobody cares. Nobody watches.
Mateo said something early in our hangouts where he was referring to a comedian who got a little bit of grief online for his lifestyle choices and his expenses, right? And I inhabit this in spirit, maybe not necessarily word for word, but the spirit of it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think we all do to a certain degree, and I know you do for a fact, Deck, because we were offline before we went live. You were talking about it in brief, right? Which is like, don't make your shit my shit.
Yeah.
Right. Don't bring your baggage onto me because this is how I'm conducting my life. Short of like some reprehensible, I'm murdering people. Right. Like if you take exception to the thing that I'm saying, cool, you're at liberty to that. But the moment you say you must also take exception to the thing that you are saying, you're nuts. I'm never going to go into that space. Right. So there are plenty of times when Mateo says something awful in this podcast to both myself and Shawn. God, I don't know how many times he like refers to Mein Kampf all the time. You know what I mean? And like in a lot of different instances.
Some good points.
Yeah. If that's the kind of stuff you want to do, man. But see, like the fact that we can joke back and forth like that, we understand the context and by which you're saying that, and we extend you that grace to be like, Deck's not like being genuine about it. He's not being true to that concept. It's because it made you laugh, and people don't want to hear that. Right. There's a whole set of like NPCs out there that just like saying that, even laughing at it, it's offensive to them because how can you possibly laugh at that off-color joke? Cool. You're absolutely at liberty to have that opinion and have that outlook in life. That's on to you. But the moment you come into my house and go like, you have to paint all these walls the colors that I want you to, no, that's not happening. Yeah. Right. Because we spent a ton of time hanging out with each other, building our relationship, building the understanding of like, you know that this is a joke. Right. And if you decide to come into the house, right, if you decide to come in here, you basically said, hey, I'm going to be going into a space in which I know what these dum-dums are capable of doing. Right. I know what these guys are all about. And now I'm going to impose a version of my world outlook, my worldview onto them. That doesn't make any sense to me. So going back to my point, don't make your shit our shit. Right. You know,
and it's interesting because I like so much of what you guys say, which I agree with, is just like practical, sensible, like, especially with the kind of like making it in comics or having to build. No, but I don't mean like you guys are so smart, but it's just, saying things, especially with people who are trying to break into the industry, like saying things that, just need to be said. Like, it's going to take a lot of work and your stuff probably sucks until it doesn't. And like, it's all incredibly helpful stuff to take on board, but I just, so much of the kind of atmosphere is like to acknowledge any kind of resistance or perseverance that's needed seems to be this kind of like, how dare you suggest that I have to for example, so I'm rambling here a little bit. I'm a big proponent of I remember art cred. I was always harping on about art cred.
Yeah. You were always a good voice for that. Yeah. I like that.
Sure. But guys? When
they would talk about a book online and they would just mention the writer and not the artist. Declan was always a voice of like, hey, you forgot to mention the artist.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add in a little hashtag art because I saw, if like something got turned into a film and they'd be like the writer's comic and be like, especially if the artist drew every issue of it, you know, I'd be like, actually, you know, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And a lot of people got on board with it, which is great. I know editors paid attention and were better for using. It was a lot of in promotion and stuff like that, you know, like, for example, Matteo, if you were, you know, if King of Spies was made, it was like Mark Miller's King of Spies. And it's like, yeah, you did all, you know, I would be like, Matteo drew all that, little things like that. And
yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this gives me the opportunity to say this thing about this is still happening to somebody that we know, which is Andrew Robinson, who did this amazing book called, he illustrated this amazing book called The Fifth Beatles. The Fifth Beatles.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how many pages, all painted, like beautiful pages. And still to these days, on advertising, they don't advertise the fact that he's the artist, and they just put the writer's name on it, which is like,
I'm sure I complained about that. Also, like, I was at the Eisner Awards when that won, and the writer was talking for like 20 minutes. It's like, shut up, man. Nobody cares. It's Andrew Robinson's art. Like, that's the only reason anybody's reading the book.
Exactly.
But things like that, you know, I mean, I would speak up about it because it just drove me crazy. But so why did I get onto that? But sorry, so my point being that, so I'm a huge advocate for artists, you know, and when I work with artists, I do my best to promote them and what have you. But at the same time, it is very, very hard to be an artist and to build your name up. And like, I'm all for helping artists kind of make, you know, follow a path, but at the same time, you got to walk that path, and that path is potholes and cross bridges and other things that this analogy doesn't really hold up to. But, you know, I'm happy to help, but like, you know, there's so much practical stuff, which doesn't sound, it's stuff that you don't want to hear, but it is 100% true. And I do like that you guys actually talk about that stuff, because you're not helping anybody by telling them it's going to be easy, you know. Even one thing I do now, if I'm talking about comics, is I'll bring up the fact that it's, you know, you're going to have to prepare to lose friends, because if you're drawing all the time, people will be annoyed with you for if you think back when you were kids, how many people stopped talking to you because you didn't go to parties or you didn't go here or there? Like, it's an isolating job, and it's not even just talent you need to have like a mental, like, there's some people who are incredible artists who do not have the mental capacity to do the job. They just don't.
Yeah. Right.
There's some people who are like, they're okay at drawing, they're decent, but they do have the mental capacity, and they manage fine because they're able to sit down and draw every day and deal with like month 3 of not having seen somebody or something like that, you know. I don't feel like that gets talked about enough, like the mental aptitude, especially when I see so many younger people having anxiety and problems like that. It's like, that's going to be tough for you, man, because like, you need a certain amount of resilience to be able to handle just the life, the actual day-to-day of it, you know?
And that's the issue I think we talked about with that comics broke me hashtag. It was just like, this is what it is. Like, you can complain all you want. This is the job.
And there's some things that should change for sure.
Give me an opportunity to like defend some of that stuff, right? Like, I think, first of all, the comics broke me hashtag, which is like, there were some good points that were being brought up in that conversation, but then at some point it just became like a bitch session using comics, that hashtag, you know? And just generally, especially in the Twitter environment, it is not set up to have extended sort of nuanced conversations about anything. And even then, at the end of the day, no one is willing to back down from their perspective, which is also something that Twitter cultivates. If I say something and a bunch of people like it or like retweet it, that immediately makes me right. No, it just means people agree with you. But there are some people who don't agree with you, and those things can also be true to their perspective and the outs. Like, not everything is like so absolute, you know, where it can be one thing or the other. So that's the stupid nature of that environment and that ecosystem. And the further away we get from that, at least the way that programs you to think, the better are we off. Because that's slowly but surely sort of just started to become the way things are. So when you take a look at the comments of this podcast, there's a handful of people who do push back, but at the very least, they're understanding the nuances and how we're talking about it. If they disagree, I don't go in there and bomb on the guy. I just go like, okay, that's probably true for you, not true for us. It does not make you wrong, right? But I think that's what happens with Twitter, right? That's what happens with generally all of social media, is if the moment it's identified that this is the more popular opinion, everything else should be thrown out because it shouldn't, that thing can't be the thing that's sustainable. So when you do say something like, it's hard, right? It's very, I'm a huge proponent of being obsessive about your craft, because I think if you get started early, you do the resting later. Now, it has every opportunity to burn you out, right? Especially if you become that level of obsessive. Where to your point, that you abandon, interpersonal relationships because you're so focused on getting good at this. But not only just getting good, once you break in, you also have to, there's also that maintenance. You need to continue to be relevant, because at some point you need to build on that credibility, right? So that people can credit you as that artist. That takes a lot of work. I'm of the mindset where you need to be obsessive about it, obsessive compulsive about it. Some people though will push back on that and go like, well, that just leads to burnout and X, Y, and Z. And that doesn't make that wrong. That statement isn't inaccurate, right? I choose one way, but it does not make my way wrong. Some people inhabit this space that I'm in, and it's worked out for them. And then some people try it and it burns them out. And suddenly they go like, well, it's not my fault. It's because it's the outside world telling me that it's this is the way they should have done it. No, friend, you're an adult. You have like eyes that are forward facing. You get to make that call. You don't get to unload that responsibility onto me because it didn't work out for you. And that's the line that people cross, right? It's the point that I was making earlier, which is they take their own baggage and they impose it onto you and say, hey, you're accountable for these things that aren't working out for me. No, you're accountable for that. I give you a perspective. It's up to you to take it out for a test run to see if it works out for you. And at the end of the day, you start adjusting accordingly, right? You start going, well, that worked, but this didn't. And I get to do that. That to me is the line that I often go like, I don't want to take that on. It's a level of accountability that people don't want to take on for themselves. So they offload it to somebody else and assume that it's correct, as opposed to going and experiencing it for themselves. And I think there's a handful of things that we end up running into in this podcast where I go like, I'm responsible for me. There's plenty of conversations that I bring up offline with these guys, and Mateo goes, that's nice, but that's not, I don't think I see it that way. I see it this way. Instead, I'm like, yeah, because you're a fucking free thinking individual, and that's the way it should be done. Social media doesn't allow for much of that.
Well, if I say two things, one is a point and one is a question. I hear what you're saying about Twitter and all that, and it's true. But what annoys me is the way people say, well, it's the platform. The platform is responsible for this, and I think that people don't take enough responsibility for like how they interact with the platform. Yeah. The Twitter, sure, there's an algorithm and it rewards and punishes certain types of behavior, but also you can like not do the thing with your thumbs. You could just choose not to. And it ties into what I was saying about art cred, because while I was very happy to do that and I felt really good about it, I felt, pretty, patting myself on the back, stand up for people, pretty good. Yep. But then it would always degenerate into artist versus writers conversation for 3 fucking days. Yes. Mateo, if you ever saw Twitter, people arguing about writers or artists, I guarantee I had done it. Some kind of art cred tweet 3 days earlier. And it drove me crazy because that was never the conversation. It was always just like, co-creators. Let's, bring them up with where we work together. Mm-hmm. But then it would just be an argument about who gets burned more, writers and artists. And that's that's made me want to stop, because I felt like I had good intentions, was creating a hell of a lot of negativity, and I don't like that. Yeah. And 2, I started catching myself looking at like press releases where it'd be like Mark Miller's whatever, and then I was like, I bet they didn't fucking mention Mateo, and then I look and I'm like, no, they did. And I caught myself all riled up, ready to like, I was hitting nails with a hammer, and then I thought I saw a nail and the hammer's ready to go, and you're like, oh, there's no nail. I gotta, you feel like you need to hit something. I realized I don't like that about myself. I don't that I'm going that road. So that's why I stopped. So it's not like I don't feel the same way. I just didn't feel like it was doing me any good after a while. So that was just a response to that. I do have a question actually. Do you think burnout is needed? Do you think you need to hit burnout at some stage in your career? Like everybody needs to do it at some stage.
I'll say this sadistically, right? Without knowing what that looks like, you don't know what to back away from, right?
That's actually why I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary is a weird word. But I almost feel like,
let me rephrase it. Do you think a creative person needs to experience burnout in order to be more aware of their limitations for the rest of their career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe this is, I know this will be an unpopular position, but I do believe that you need to go experience it, right? Mm-hmm. Only because without understanding what that looks like, you'll never know how to plan around it, right? There is often, when I was a lot younger, I lifted a lot of weights, right? And I needed to put my body under that level of stress and load so that my central nervous system would then know how to react to it moving forward, right? That is a level of like emotional, psychological, mental evolution that I need to put my body under that stresses. So I'll know like, okay, but it also upgrades my overall physicality so that the next time that I try it, it's that much more evolved and my body knows how to handle it. So that's purely from a physical sense. But from a psychological sense, if you were built for it, and this is the caveat, that you have to be built to understand that you are putting yourself through that stress actively, if that makes any sense. I think when it hurts people the most is they don't know they never intended to go into that burnout space.
That's
so
what
that's
I was
the
thinking.
only thing that would inject. Yeah, you have to say to yourself, I'm going to put myself into the burnout space so that when I experience it, I know what that looks like and I know when to back away from it, if that makes any sense. Go ahead, man.
But yeah. It's, since when you started this whole thing, you said necessary. What I think it's really necessary is being aware of where you're at, like mentally and physically. As long as you are aware and you realize when the burnout is getting close, then I don't think you need to experience it. So you still have, the freedom to decide what to do with it. But yeah, I think that more than actually like experiencing it, although I think it's important, it's way more necessary to learn how to monitor yourself and see when it's happening in order to stop earlier, especially because we don't get younger. So, our limit is going to be, shorter and shorter and shorter. So yeah, that's.
How about you, Shawn?
Those are my 2 cents on the subject.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the personality of the person. I am someone who had to experience it because I thought of myself, like I didn't look at myself as human. I was like, oh, I just have to keep pushing myself. I have to keep dealing with stress. I have to keep until it just.
Where were you in your when that happened to you? Where were you in your career?
He was 7 years old.
He was 3 years old.
He was just.
Well, that's the same joke.
It's actually I haven't really worked since it happened. Like I haven't done interior since it happened. What happened was the work all just vanished, and it just like it threw me into a complete state of chaos of not knowing what was going on and realizing I was super burnt out. So I needed that. I needed to experience that, and I needed that to inform me better. And now I can say to myself, hey, I'm getting a little tired. Like I can step aside now, where like before, like there were times where I was holding an eye open because it was burning because I was drawing too long and just trying to get stuff done. But I think someone like Eric seems to have a better disposition than me. So he's more like he had more awareness of this. Now I'm gaining that awareness, which was necessary for me.
How about you, Declan? Do you still experience burnouts here and there, or you're monitoring yourself and you're managing your schedule in a different way? Now. Yeah,
I should probably have an answer since I asked the question, shouldn't I? Yeah, no, I do now. Like, I think my working hours could be better. I work too late and get up I don't get up. I get up late and work too late. I could shift that bed to be a little bit healthier. And I was for a time. I have a better, my career's changed where there's so much writing, and I just trying to find the time to draw is harder. So when I am drawing and, and you get that flow going, I really try and ride that wave as much as I can, which ultimately probably means I work too late sometimes. So I'm not perfect, but my lifestyle's changed a lot. A year ago, I moved out of Dublin and back to my hometown. So I go see family more, and I'm getting out of the house more and just kind of doing stuff that isn't work more, which, isn't, it's the opposite of what I want to do. My brain wants to do, but at the same time, I know it's good for me overall. But I would say I hit 2 moments of close to. Yeah,
absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Close to burnout. Because you live near family, don't you, Matteo?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I constantly see family and friends like all the time. And since I started, going back to, putting family and friends in my life instead of just being so focused on work, like the work gets better, even though you have less time available for work, the work gets better. At least that's my feeling. Eric, what do you think about
like
my
when
work?
I was hustling and hustling. Like I was drawing, at one stage I was drawing Thunderbolts and Northlanders at the same time. Or I was working on Venom and Conan at the same time. Like I knew I was kind of getting hot or getting some attention, and I knew I could work more, and I'd like, okay, here's more opportunities. I'm going to take as much as I can, as I can. And I do remember I kind of got close. I wouldn't say I hit burnout, but I got very, very close to it. But I've seen other people, and I've given them advice. I'm like, don't do this, don't do what Johnny Don't does. Like, I can see the way you're going. Don't do that. It's not good for you. And every person will completely ignore you. They have to, it's been my experience. They have to experience it themselves. You need to know your maximum. Yeah. There's some people who did 3 pages in a day, and they will schedule themselves to go, oh, well, I can do 3 pages in a day. So that's how I'll just do 3 pages for the next 2 weeks. And you're like, no. That was a one-off. You can't schedule yourself for the maximum every day. Those are magical days. You cannot schedule for that. So I think I needed to realize that I needed to know where I hit my limits. And I do remember working on a book one day where what was I doing? I was doing again 2 books at the same time, and I penciled, inked, flatted a page for the colorist who colored it that day, and it went to print that day. And it was Geordie at the time. I remember she said, like, we shouldn't have to work this hard all the time. And it was a fair thing to say. I mean, to me, I'm like, it's Batman. I've got to do everything I possibly can. Now I'm in a very nice position where I get to do creator-owned books that I want to do. And the work I do that's work for hire is stuff that I choose to do. It's not like, I didn't take Alien because I needed a gig. I took Alien because I thought it would be an interesting project to work on for a year as a writer. Yeah. Whatever I'm actually very lucky. It's like, hey, do you want to work on this character? I'm like, yeah, that would be really cool. I'd like to do that. Whereas back then, you were just taking whatever gig was going, So now I have to remind myself, like, I can afford to say no to things, and I can afford to schedule things that work for a healthier life. It's harder to do that when you're starting out, because you're just trying to just make everything happen all the time.
Let me add to your point, Dick, which is, I think that everything that you're saying aligns to the thing to my answer earlier, which is like, you can try to curb people away from overworking or burnout or whatever it is, like, over applying themselves. But until they go experience it themselves, they'll never know what that looks like, right? So there's like people push back on the idea of burnout because it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a very sympathetic place of like, I've experienced it. Please don't go through it myself. And people adopt that concept. in concept form, but not in actual application. Rarely do they ever understand what that means. Of course, it makes sense. Hey, don't go jump into the pit of snakes because they're going to bite you. Yeah, in concept, that makes a lot of sense. But if there's something at the end of that pit of snakes that they believe they can get, which is to your, a career, pay, whatever, prestige, whatever it is, they're going to go and do it until they go like, whoa, that was a lot to put in just to get bitten by a bunch of snakes. I don't think I'll do that anymore. So the concept of it makes a lot of sense. The practice of it is really a nuanced sort of band, So is it necessary? I don't think it's necessary, but I think 90% of people are going to go do it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's about figuring out how to get through some kind of blockade or barrier. Like I had another one there after whatever book it was, but myself and Jordy had broken up, and she's an amazing colorist and she colored everything I did and made me look really good. And I had a real crisis of self-confidence at the time where I'm like, am I even any good? Like she just made me look so good all the time. Now what am I going to do? And I had relied on her to make me look good for years. And all of a sudden I was like left a little bit rudderless. So I had a huge, internal kind of moment of doubt, really. But I think that's actually what pushed me towards doing my own stuff as regards deciding to write and draw something with Old Dog, I think, and coloring myself, taking more ownership over my own work. So there are bad things that can happen to you that can be good things too. It just I think we all get pressure points sometimes, and it's learning how to deal with those pressure points, be it how people treat you online, or be it like relationships with editors or physical burnout or whatever. I don't think that's the thing really talk about much. At least I don't hear it that much. Yeah, for sure.
And we're going to end on that positive note before Mateo ends up talking about himself a little bit more, We're at an hour 12.
Oh, by the way, I did 2 monthly books at the same time as well.
All right, here we go. He just had to let you know.
So he's not lying. He's not lying when he said at minute 50 everything was going to start making a lot of sense. So we're going to cut him off at minute 67. So, Deck, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. We're going to put all the links to your book.
Or talk at you. I'm not really sure.
No, you're doing great. You did great. Thank you, man. I'm going to stop this now.
Thanks, guys.
The Inkpulp Podcast.
The global central banks are at a crossroads. After decades of zero-bound interest rates and quantitative easing, debt levels domestically and worldwide have reached critical levels. As the money printing bonanza of 2020 comes home to roost, dark feedback loops lurk under the surface of our economy, foreboding of a future of extreme inflation and financial devastation. The ships of state, unmoored from the tethers of hard money and taxation, have wandered into a maelstrom that threatens to destroy the very system we base our economic lives on. We are now entering a place from which few fiat monies have ever returned from alive. The Federal Reserve, the hegemon that runs the dollar-based global monetary system, is trapped in a black hole of its own design. They believe they can save themselves and the system. The terrifying truth is that we are not close to the event horizon, we're already past it. Only hard choices lie ahead. Welcome to the dollar endgame.